In the heart of London, where the halls of Queen Alexandra Hospital never sleep, a woman whispers secrets to someone who cannot answer. Or at least, that's what everyone believes. Charlotte Miller, a dedicated and reserved nurse, moves swiftly among patients and charts, but she always ends her shifts in the same place, the intensive care unit, bed 42. There, a man with no name, no past, no one, lies in absolute silence. No family has shown up, no documents, no clues. Subscribe to the channel and help us grow. Like, comment, and share. This helps us a lot and keeps us motivated to bring you more enchanting stories. And we'd love to get to know you too. Tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. In the ICU at Queen Alexandra, a body lies in a deep coma after a mysterious accident. The doctors have nicknamed him Patient X, but Charlotte gave him a name, Lucas. "Good night, Lucas," she whispers, settling beside the bed like someone greeting an old friend. "Today was a hard day. I hope you dreamed of something better than what I lived." Charlotte speaks to him as if writing a living diary, pouring out anguish, memories, and fears that have remained locked away for years. At 30, she carries the weight of a life marked by loss and silence. Her mother passed away when she was young. Her father, a rigid and distant man, cut off all contact during her teenage years. Since then, Charlotte has learned to be her own foundation, until she found an unconscious stranger who, ironically, listened better than anyone else ever had. In the dim light of the ICU, with the steady beeping of monitors filling the void, she finds something she's never had: space to be whole. And in the silence of that man, she feels understood. Charlotte doesn't know his real name, nor his story, but something inside her believes he's not entirely gone. There's a strange power in the way his presence fills the room, an inexplicable feeling that keeps her from treating him like just another clinical case. "Maybe you were someone important," she murmurs one night, holding his motionless hand. "Or maybe you ran away from everything, like I've wanted to do so many times." Her colleagues watch with curiosity, some with quiet disapproval. "You're getting too involved," they warn. But she doesn't care. The whole world may doubt, but Charlotte feels, somehow, that he is still there, present, fighting. As the weeks go by, her visits to Lucas become more than just part of her shift. She begins coming in even on her days off. She brings books and reads aloud. She plays soft classical music. She tells terrible jokes, recalls childhood memories, shares dreams and frustrations. He becomes her silent confidant, her most intimate secret, and the more she speaks, the more she allows herself to feel. Charlotte begins to long for those moments. Out in the world, she's just another nurse among hundreds. But in that room, in front of that unknown man, she feels seen, even without eyes looking back at her. It's there that her loneliness screams the loudest, and finally finds an echo. One night, after an exhausting shift and a breakdown stifled in the hospital bathroom, she returns to him and whispers with a trembling voice, "I don't know who you are. I don't know if you'll ever wake up. But I feel like I can't imagine my life without you here anymore." And in that moment, as she turns to leave, without noticing, a single tear slides slowly down the unconscious man's face. In a city where millions rush past one another without ever meeting, two souls, one too awake, the other trapped in silence, begin to find each other. And it all begins there, with a lonely nurse who dared to give a name to the void, and a stranger who just might be hearing every word. Inside bed 42, behind still eyelids, something pulses persistently. He doesn't move, doesn't speak, doesn't react. But he listens. In the deepest silence of his own body, Lucas Bennett is conscious. Trapped in a dense and endless darkness, he lives in a limbo where time dissolves. There is no light, no external sound, until she arrives, and with her, the only thing that can penetrate that invisible prison, her voice, Charlotte. At first, her words come muddled, muffled as if underwater, But slowly they become clearer, almost tangible. She speaks to him every day, and without knowing it, she becomes his only link to the world he left behind. Her voice is like a line thrown into the depths, pulling him toward the surface. He doesn't know how long he's been there. He doesn't understand what happened or why he can't open his eyes or move his fingers. In the beginning, he panicked. He tried to scream, tried to run. But his body didn't respond. It was Charlotte who made him stay. Her voice, her stories, her confessions, they kept him anchored. When everything felt like it was slipping into the abyss, she held him with words. "It rained all day today, and for some reason, I thought maybe you'd like that," she said one afternoon. And Lucas wanted more than anything to answer, "Yes, I like the rain. I remember it." Day after day, Charlotte shares pieces of the outside world with him. She tells him about patients, about the absurdities of hospital life, about her old dreams. She reveals she once wanted to be a writer, that, as a child, she used to hide in the aisles of a public library just to escape the fights at home. She speaks of her mother as if she can still smell the coffee she brewed on cold mornings, and of her father with the detachment of someone who built walls to protect a broken heart. Every story she tells is absorbed by Lucas like medicine. He clings to every detail, as if it were vital to keep him conscious. They're not just words, they're signs of life. While the world believes he's in a deep coma, he's registering everything, every pause, every breath. And over time, something begins to shift inside him. Where once there was only darkness, now there are scattered colors, fragments of memory, disjointed images, yet somehow familiar. A glass hallway, a helicopter, a smiling face, and then a flash of light. He feels something went wrong, that someone betrayed him, but he still can't put the pieces together. Everything feels scrambled, like a puzzle that doesn't quite fit. But Charlotte's voice brings order to the chaos. As the days pass, Lucas begins to wait for her. He has no control over time, but he recognizes the patterns, the softness of her footsteps, the creak of the chair wheels, the way she adjusts the sheets, the warmth of her hand touching his. All of it becomes routine, refuge, and somehow, something he doesn't yet fully understand. He wants to wake up. He wants to see her. He wants to know who this woman is, who, without knowing who he is, speaks to him so tenderly, who refuses to see him as an empty body, who treats his presence with affection as if he were still there. Because he is. He just can't prove it. One afternoon, she arrives later than usual, and her voice sounds shaky, tired. "Sorry, Lucas. It's been a rough day. Sometimes I think I'm foolish for coming here every day to talk to someone who may never come back." He wants to scream, to squeeze her hand, but all he can do is gather a desperate, silent thought. "I'm here. Don't stop. Please, don't stop." And in that moment, something shifts inside him, like a muscle long asleep beginning to twitch. A faint electric current, a spark, a subtle impulse that vanishes before reaching the surface. But it's enough. Hope is reborn. He isn't just trapped. He's fighting. And now, he's fighting for her. Before becoming Patient X, Lucas Bennett was a well-known name in Britain's most prestigious tech circles. At 36, he was considered a prodigy in the field of artificial intelligence, a founder of a multi-billion-pound startup promising to revolutionize the NHS through predictive diagnostics powered by AI. Charismatic, discreet, and visionary, Lucas was constantly invited to international conferences and courted by tech giants with multi-million-pound offers. But he had other plans. He wanted to use his brilliance for something bigger than profit. He wanted to save lives. Raised in a family obsessed with appearances and power, Lucas always felt out of place among inheritances, gala dinners, and boardroom meetings. His mother, a gentle and artistic soul, died when he was still a teenager. His father, a ruthless finance magnate, remarried months later, bringing with him a new heir, Patrick Bennett. Cold, calculating, and constantly living in Lucas's shadow, Patrick grew up nursing a silent envy that over time turned into poisonous resentment. Lucas, on the other hand, never saw his half-brother as a threat. Intelligent but insecure, Patrick always seemed content to work behind the scenes. While Lucas stood in the spotlight, Patrick preferred numbers, contracts, invisible control. Over time, Lucas handed over part of the company's administration to him, trusting they could transform the healthcare system into something more humane and efficient, together. It was that misjudgment that nearly cost him his life. On the morning of the accident, Lucas boarded a helicopter bound for Edinburgh, where he would present the final stage of his pilot project to the Ministry of Health. He was confident, optimistic. But the journey was cut short just minutes after takeoff. A mechanical failure, supposedly inexplicable, caused the helicopter to lose altitude and crash in a remote area north of York. The wreckage was found days later. The pilot was dead. Lucas was unconscious with multiple injuries. No documents. No immediate facial recognition. The confusion and severity of his condition led to him being transferred as an anonymous patient to Queen Alexandra Hospital, where he remained without identity for weeks. The news coverage was discreet. A possible accident. A missing entrepreneur. Patrick temporarily took control of the company, publicly expressing concern and mourning. But behind the scenes he began moving pieces as if his brother were already gone. But Lucas was alive, trapped between who he was and what they made him. In his imprisoned mind, memories return in disconnected flashes, Patrick's face, cold and expressionless, staring at him before the trip. A tense conversation days earlier about a contract clause Lucas wanted to add, a clause that would prevent the company from being sold to foreign corporations. Patrick disagreed. Called it naive idealism, Lucas insisted. Said it wasn't about money, it was about purpose. The last thing he heard from his brother echoes in his mind, between the shadows. The world doesn't run on purpose, Lucas. It runs on power. Then, silence. The fall. The darkness. These memories now resurface slowly, like the wreckage of a sunken ship. And the more Charlotte's voice surrounds him, the clearer the fragments become. The truth is there, lurking. And Lucas begins to understand. The crash wasn't an accident. Someone wanted him out of the way. Someone who knew every detail of the flight. Someone who expected to inherit him, not as a brother, but as an enemy. Trapped in his own body, Lucas realizes that his only chance at justice lies outside, and that, by some twist of fate, it's in the hands of a lonely nurse who, unknowingly, became the key to his survival. While the world goes on without him, Lucas begins to piece together the puzzle they tried to bury with his name. And he vows, silently, that if he gets a second chance, he won't just live, he'll fight. Time moves through the hospital like a quiet tide, and Charlotte remains steady in her improvised routine by Lucas's side. What began as a gesture of empathy has slowly become an unbreakable bond, though to everyone else, it remains one-sided. But inside that room, something blossoms, something that defies medical logic or common understanding. She begins arriving earlier, leaving later. She brings books to read aloud, classic literature, detective stories, fairy tales. Deep down, she believes stories have power, and that maybe, somewhere inside that motionless man, the words are planting seeds. One day she reads Wuthering Heights with such emotion that she almost forgets where she is. When she finishes, she whispers, "Maybe, if you were awake, you'd say Heathcliff was just a foolish man in love. But you know what? Sometimes being a fool is all we've got left." Lucas, deep inside, feels it. He doesn't know how to explain it. But when she reads, his mind clears. When she laughs, his thoughts expand. And when she holds his hand, an unexplainable warmth moves through him. For the first time since the crash, he feels like he's not alone. Charlotte starts talking to him as if he could respond. She tells him about her childhood in Devon, about the dog she lost, about the days spent caring for her sick mother, and how that made her choose nursing. She confesses she's written letters she never sent, and that she's afraid of silence, even though now it's the only place where she feels safe. "You've become my hiding place," she says one night. "The world out there is too loud, but here, everything makes sense." As the days pass, something unexpected happens. During a particularly emotional chapter, Charlotte notices a slight twitch in Lucas's fingers. She frowns, leans closer. "Lucas?" Nothing. Silence. But she swears she saw it. She notes it in the chart and tells the team, who dismiss it as an involuntary spasm. A neuromuscular reflex, they say, but she doesn't believe them. Days later, while gently wiping his forehead, Charlotte sees a single tear run down the side of his face. She freezes, stares at him for long seconds. "That's not a reflex," she murmurs. She sits on the edge of the bed, heart pounding. "You're in there, aren't you?" She starts documenting every small change, breathing patterns, slight creases in his brow at certain moments, how his heart rate seems to respond when she talks about sad things. And even though the doctors remain skeptical, Charlotte feels something extraordinary is happening. It's not madness, it's connection. She begins visiting Lucas even on her days off. Sometimes she just sits silently beside him. Other times, she closes her eyes and shares dreams about living in a house by the sea, having a garden, listening to music in the late afternoon with someone by her side. She says all of it without expecting a response, but with the certainty that someone is listening. Inside himself, Lucas fights against the limits of his body. He tries to move his fingers, tries to speak, but everything still feels far away. Still, he starts to believe that maybe he's not lost. Charlotte has become his lighthouse, and for her, he wants to come back. One rainy evening, she enters the room with eyes full of tears. She approaches slowly, holds his hand tightly, and says in a soft voice, "I don't know if this makes any sense, but I think I'm falling in love with you. And I don't even know your name." Lucas feels a jolt. An electric wave surges through his awareness. Inside that motionless body, something awakens with new strength. Because now, he doesn't just want to survive. He wants to return. For her. The days at Queen Alexandra Hospital begin to take a disturbing turn. The light, intimate atmosphere Charlotte had built around bed 42 starts being disrupted by a strange presence. A new consultant, recently assigned to the neurology department, starts showing up frequently in the ICU. He's discreet, polite, impeccably dressed, and always carries a leather folder full of documents he never shares. He says his name is Richard Moore, but something in his cold, meticulous eyes makes Charlotte shiver for no apparent reason. He begins to show an unusual interest in the patient X case. He studies the scans, reviews the reports, questions the nurses. When speaking with the doctors, he constantly suggests the patient be transferred to a private clinic in Manchester, specialized in prolonged and experimental treatments. The proposal, though technically sound on the surface, seems to carry another intention. Urgency, a need to get him out. Charlotte's instincts flare up. Something is wrong. That sudden concern for a patient who was ignored for weeks makes no sense. And Richard's manner is far too rehearsed, too perfect, like he's following a script. She starts asking discreet questions, digging into records, trying to verify his credentials. But every attempt leads to a dead end. No institution confirms his background. No number checks out. And her unease grows. One night, when she returns to the hospital off duty, she finds Richard alone by Lucas's bed. He's standing silently, observing the patient like someone examining an object. The dim light in the room makes the scene even more sinister. Charlotte enters abruptly. He turns with a slight smile. "Just checking the patient's condition." "Routine procedure," he says, overly calm. Charlotte replies coldly. Routine doesn't include unauthorized solo visits, especially not at 2 in the morning. In the days that followed, tensions rose. She tried to convince the team that the transfer wasn't safe, but found no support. Her colleagues began to treat her with distance. Rumors spread that she was emotionally involved with a patient, and that it was affecting her professional conduct. The head nurse, once close to her, now avoided confrontation. Someone was pulling the strings behind the curtain. And then, the blow came. Charlotte was summoned to an administrative meeting. Allegations surfaced: inappropriate behavior, irregular attendance, improper conduct with a comatose patient. The words were harsh, the tone cold. When she tried to defend herself, she realized the decision had already been made. She was suspended from the hospital indefinitely, under investigation. On the way home, she felt completely hollowed out. Everything she had built, everything she had carefully cultivated, had been undone by invisible, cruel hands. She clutched her badge in her hands, as if it could still keep her connected to that room, to that story, to the man she had silently come to love. At the hospital, Richard watched from a distance as Charlotte left. Then, with a cold, concise phone call, he said, "It's done." Meanwhile, within his inert body, Lucas felt something shift. The absence of the voice that had sustained him, the break in the routine that had kept him lucid, was like an abyss opening beneath him. He felt the loss without seeing it. He felt the rupture without touch. She was no longer there. And that triggered a silent scream within him. An impulse so intense it shook every cell. The consciousness that once floated now roared. Lucas didn't know what had happened, but he felt with terrifying clarity that she was gone, and that there was something, or someone, who wanted him to remain like this. Motionless, harmless, silenced, forever. On the gray morning after her suspension, Charlotte returned to the hospital one last time, not as an employee, but as someone who refused to leave without saying goodbye. She knew she'd be stopped if she tried to enter officially, so she chose dawn, when the halls were still empty and the shifts changed hands in silence. She slipped in through the back entrance with her still active badge and went straight to the ICU. Bed 42 was exactly as she had left it, but something about it felt colder, more solitary, more empty. Lucas's body remained motionless, the monitors pulsing steadily. She approached gently, like someone visiting a grave. She knelt beside the bed and for a long moment said nothing, just studied his face, trying to memorize every detail. Then, with a choked voice, she whispered, "I don't know if I'll be able to come back. Maybe this was the last time I'll see you, and I hate that thought, because you were the only real presence I had lately, the only person who listened without judgment, who stayed even without responding." She touched his hand softly, eyes brimming. "I wish I had met you awake, known your real name, learned what you liked, seen your smile. But even without all that, you gave me more than anyone ever has. You heard me. And I fell in love with this meaningful silence between us." And then, as if the world had stopped breathing, Charlotte leaned in and gently kissed his forehead. "If you can hear me, please, fight. For yourself, for me, for everything that could still happen." She left without being seen, and the room fell silent. But inside Lucas's body, something exploded. Her words had become sparks, igniting a fire that couldn't be contained. The pain of absence, the despair of helplessness, and the newly awakened love fused into a brutal impulse to survive. Lucas's mind, once adrift, now roared like an engine searching for freedom. First came full consciousness, the clarity of sounds, textures, the light behind his closed eyelids. Then, the effort, like trying to move mountains with thought alone. He focused all his strength on a single point, his fingers. Nothing. Tried again. Nothing. But then, remembering Charlotte's last words, "Please, fight," something inside responded, as if his body finally recognized the call. A finger twitched, slight, quick, but real. The heart monitor registered a small spike. The sensors detected a faint but noticeable fluctuation. Hours passed. Doctors entered, adjusted machines, unaware of the detail. But Lucas noticed, and persisted. Millimetric movements in his fingers, subtle tension in his jaw. Slowly, his awareness anchored itself deep, unwavering. He wasn't just present. He was coming back. It was during a silent night, without Charlotte, without distractions, that the impossible happened. Lucas, with Herculean effort, managed to control his tongue for a fraction of a second, and he murmured, a raspy, dragged, nearly inaudible word. Charlotte. The sound tore through the room like thunder in silence. A passing nurse heard it, rushed in, confirmed it. Lucas Bennett had spoken. Alarms blared. Medical teams were called. But none of that mattered to him. Because in that moment, amidst pain and confusion, only one truth echoed like a drum in his mind. She heard him first, and now he would do the impossible to find her again. The news of Lucas Bennett's awakening spread through the hospital like a silent wildfire. First among the neurologists, who couldn't explain how a patient in a vegetative state had suddenly regained consciousness. Then among the administrators, who began treating him with unusual caution. But no one there knew who he really was. They still called him Patient X. Until, during a routine evaluation, Lucas whispered his real name. Lucas Bennett. The impact was immediate. A quick search in the national records brought everything to light. The missing billionaire, the helicopter crash, the mystery, the company in transition. And with it, panic began to spread in another direction, to those who had tried to erase his existence. Still weak, with limited movement and faltering speech, Lucas asked for a phone call, but not to his family, not to the company. He asked for one name, Anthony Hargreaves, his former personal attorney, and the only man he trusted blindly. When Anthony walked into the room and saw his client alive, eyes sharp and focused, gripping his hand firmly, he knew this wasn't just a miraculous return. It was the beginning of a counterattack. Lucas recounted everything he remembered. The last meeting with Patrick, the tension, the clause he wanted to implement, the trip, the cold face of his brother moments before takeoff. The pieces were there, and with them, the certainty of what had happened. Anthony wasted no time. He demanded access to company records, contracts signed over the past months, and financial transactions. Silently, he gathered evidence. He uncovered alterations in original documents, unauthorized sales of technology to foreign companies, and a series of transfers made to phantom funds, all linked to Patrick. But the key piece came from an unexpected place: the hospital itself. During his rehabilitation, Lucas requested audio from the ICU's internal cameras. He had a hunch, and when he heard the recording from the night Charlotte was removed, he was sure. The voice, the conversation, the man posing as a consultant. He wasn't a doctor. He was Patrick in disguise, personally orchestrating the removal of the only person who could stop his plan. Armed with all this, Lucas called a press conference. The event was held in one of Westminster's historic halls. The media, still reeling from his reappearance, packed the venue. And when he entered, leaning on a cane, dressed in a dark suit, his gaze unwavering, the silence was total. He began with a simple sentence. "I was conscious the entire time you thought I was dead, and I heard every word of the woman who saved me." Then, one by one, the secrets were revealed. The recordings of Patrick at the hospital, the falsified documents, the hidden accounts, the sabotaged helicopter, the attempt not only to erase him from the company, but from the world. All presented with evidence, dates, signatures. Patrick's arrest was ordered right there, in front of the cameras. His face flashed on the screen for a few seconds before he was taken away by officers, and in that moment, Lucas didn't look back. He just closed his eyes for a brief second, like someone completing a long journey. After the press conference, he declined interviews. He asked for just one thing: Charlotte's address. Because more than proving he was alive, more than reclaiming his empire, he needed to find her. The woman who believed in him when he no longer had the strength. The woman who spoke into the void and, without knowing it, reignited his soul. Now free and once again the owner of his own destiny, Lucas didn't want to return to the world he once knew. He wanted to walk toward the one who had saved him. With words, with presence, with love. The address led him far from the skyscrapers of London, away from the cold hospital corridors, from boardrooms and press flashes. It was a small coastal town in the north of England, where time seemed to move more slowly, and the sky melted into the sea with a serenity Lucas had never known. There, in a former school-turned-shelter, operated an NGO that welcomed people facing emotional vulnerability, victims of grief, abandonment, and silent traumas. And that's where he found her. Charlotte was in the inner courtyard, helping to sort boxes of clothes and books. She wore a light sweater, her hair in a casual bun, and that same intense gaze he had learned to recognize, even when he couldn't see her. She had her back turned when he arrived. Hesitant, leaning on his cane, his heart raced like he was about to leap off a cliff. She turned slowly, sensing footsteps approaching. And when her eyes met his, there was a moment of absolute silence. No words, no reaction, just the world coming to a halt. "Lucas," she whispered, as if she couldn't believe it. He nodded, a small, quiet smile on his lips. In the flesh. She covered her mouth with her hand, eyes filled with raw, almost painful emotion. She walked toward him slowly, as if afraid it was just another late-coming dream. And then, finally, she embraced him. No words, no logic, no hesitation. Just the embrace of someone who waited unknowingly. Someone who believed without proof. Lucas closed his eyes and let that moment consume him entirely. It was like returning to his own body, like finally arriving at the place that had always been his. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered, resting her head on his chest. "And I spent every second wanting to come back to find you," he replied, holding her tightly. "You kept me alive, Charlotte, literally. I heard everything, every word, every story, every silence. You saved me." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "You heard me?" "Yes," he answered, eyes moist. "From the very beginning, from the first time you called me Lucas, even without knowing." Charlotte cried without shame. The tears flowed freely, mixed with the nervous laughter of someone who doesn't know how to react to the impossible. He hugged her again, then pulled a small envelope from his pocket. "This is for you," he said, handing it to her. Inside was a handwritten letter, every word carefully chosen. He told her everything. How his memory slowly returned, the constant fear, the fragile hope that bloomed every time he heard her voice. He told her how she had become his anchor, how her goodbye pushed him to the edge, and how the love born in silence had brought him back to life. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me again," he confessed. "But I had to try." Charlotte didn't respond right away. She just smiled, her eyes still glassy with tears. Then she took his hands in hers. "I waited for you," she said, even without knowing I was waiting. They sat right there, in the garden of the NGO, beneath a gray sky that had just begun to open. And as they talked, laughed, and exchanged aloud the words they had long held in silence, both of them knew, without saying it, this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of what they had lived in silence for so long. The wedding took place 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning in the Scottish countryside. No luxury, no spotlights, no formalities. A small, intimate ceremony, attended only by those who had truly been part of their journey. A quiet garden on the outskirts of Inverary, golden leaves covering the ground, a gentle breeze moving through the trees, and the faint sound of a creek running nearby. Charlotte wore a simple dress, light fabric flowing, with flowers woven into her delicately pinned-up hair. Lucas, in a black suit, smiled with that gleam in his eyes, the same look she had known since the hospital days, even before he ever woke up. They exchanged handwritten vows, no microphones, no rehearsals, just words born of pain and healing. "You taught me that sometimes silence holds the deepest truths," he said, voice steady and full of emotion. "And that love can bloom even in places without answers, as long as there is presence." "And you," Charlotte replied, "showed me that hope isn't a pretty word, but a daily choice. That the love we give, even with no guarantees, returns. Somehow, it always returns." Their exchange of rings was marked by quiet smiles, soft tears, and gentle applause. Nothing about that moment was for show. It was about survival, renewal, and choice. Two lives that touched in the most improbable place, turning silence into connection, absence into presence. After the ceremony, they moved into their new home, a restored old stone building in a small Scottish village. There, in what was once an abandoned rural school, Charlotte and Lucas founded the Hearth and Hope Center, a place for emotional recovery that combined modern therapy, human warmth, and personalized medical care. A space created for those who, like them, had suffered traumas too quiet to be heard in traditional clinics. On their first day, Charlotte watched as visitors arrived, grieving mothers, veterans with hollow eyes, young people weighed down by chronic anxiety, lonely elders whose memories outweighed their present. And in every face, she recognized pieces of the pain she once knew. Lucas, still walking cautiously, observed everything with the gaze of someone who knew. It wasn't about saving the world, but about giving shelter to those who were tired of fighting alone. They lived simply. Mornings were filled with sessions, walks along lake trails, and shared meals with patients and staff. At night they read together, like the times when Charlotte read to him, while he slept without truly sleeping. But now he answered. He commented. He laughed. He held her hand. One day, sitting by the fireplace, she asked if he remembered the first time he heard her. "I remember the sound of your voice before I understood the words. It was like light entering a dark room. After that, everything started to fall into place." "And now?" she asked, smiling. Lucas looked at her for a long moment, as if he had everything, yet still felt amazed by his own luck. "Now, I know that healing came before awareness, and that love came before reason." Charlotte closed her eyes for a second, letting the words wash over her like an old, familiar song. Because she knew that this story, with all its abysses and rebirths, would never be forgotten. And there, in the quietest corner of Scotland, surrounded by memories they had almost never lived, they finally understood. You don't need to understand everything to start over. You just need to feel. And in that place where words once couldn't reach, now everything bloomed. If you've made it this far with a warm heart, and maybe a few tears in your eyes, then this story touched you too. And guess what? This is just the beginning. Here at Enchanting Stories, we believe in the power of stories like Charlotte and Lucas's, full of twists, emotions, and that kind of love that speaks even through silence. So, if you love stories that heal, that move you, that make you forget the world for a few minutes, you already know what to do, right? Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming Enchanting Stories, and like this video to help our magical community grow even more. Oh, and we want to get to know you too. Tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. It'll be amazing to see where all these hearts beating along with ours are coming from. And remember, just by being here, you're already part of this story. We'll see you in the next one, with another soul-stirring story.